Oh, hi there. My name is Prostetnic Vogon Jeffs, and I love horror movies. Don't get me wrong, I'm not all in on them like some sort of deranged psychopath. I love all sorts of movies, all sorts of genres. Good is good, bad is bad, and sometimes good is bad and bad is good. Comprende?
What are you talking about?
It's like music. I'm a punk rocker at my core with a bit of a metalhead thrown in for good measure. But I'll listen to Snoop and Conway Twitty and the odd Enya tune.
Well, hello, Mr. Fancy Pants.
Don't judge me. But horror movies are something special. They come in all shapes and sizes and deal with themes as diverse as the people who enjoy them. They're terrible and fantastic and gross and touching, which raises an important question.
Why?
Why do we love horror? And by we, I'm obviously talking about those of us who love it. Not everybody does. We'll talk about that in a bit, but no, not everyone loves horror movies. So when I ask the question, why do we love horror, I'm clearly not talking about we as if it applies to every single person on planet Earth, and you know what? Forget it. You guys know what I'm saying. You get it. You're a smart bunch. I don't need to over-explain everything. When I was younger, I don't know. Don't ask me how old I was. I can't remember exactly how old I was at the time. It was a long time ago. But I remember my family visiting some friends. I'm pretty sure it wasn't extended family. I can't remember everyone who was there, but I have vivid memories of hanging out with a group of older kids, the offspring of whomever my parents were partying with. Hanging out in a living room that I can clearly see in my mind's eye, but I can't associate with any of the homes of my known relatives. This is all beside the point. The scene I'm trying to set is that I was in this place, an unfamiliar place with a bunch of older kids, and my sister, I'm pretty sure she was there too. And we were watching movies. Our parents were sedating us with television and doing their best to ignore the chaos spewing out from our collective adolescence. And at some point, some ethereal moment on a bright and warm summer day, one of those older kids I was hanging out with threw on a movie. A VHS tape. One of these things. If you have no idea what this thing is, well, bless your young heart. The tape was a home release of the 1987 slasher classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. I can't remember if I watched the whole movie at the time, but one scene haunted me for years. It continues to haunt me to this very day, to this very moment, right now. Right now. Fans of the series will probably already know where I'm heading with this, but there was one particular sequence that was so shocking and traumatic that it will forever hold permanent residence in a small corner of my mind. In the third installment of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, Nancy Thompson, the final girl from the original movie, is now a psychiatrist interning at Weston Hills Psychiatric Hospital, the primary setting of the movie. The story centers around Kristen Parker, a patient with the ability to pull others into her dreams, and how she and a group of kids team up to rescue their friend, Joey, and put an end to Freddy's terror. One of the teenagers being cared for in the hospital is a young sleepwalker named Philip Anderson. He gets a visit from Freddy, who slices him up and turns him into a marionette. Krueger, acting as puppeteer, guides Philip through the hospital and up to the roof, cutting the strings and letting Philip fall to his death. It's one of the best and most creative death scenes in the franchise, from one of the best movies in the franchise, and it hit my younger self like a sack of wet potatoes in a burlap sack of instant anguish. It was shocking and frightening and exhilarating. And it turned me off horror movies for years. What can I say? I was a bit of a preteen pussy. Don't look at me like that, Mr. and Mrs. I've been a horror fan since I came out of my mother's Vagorny Weaver. Speaking of which, I didn't see Alien until I was in my early teens, and I'm pretty sure this was the scene that ignited my love of horror movies. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha. I can deal with blood and guts if I get to see something like this every now and again. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Know what I mean? Know what I mean? Okay, let's get back on track. Why do we love or hate horror movies? What makes some folks avoid them like the plague, while others can't get enough? An adrenaline rush, also known as an epinephrine surge, is a rapid release of hormones in the body, usually triggered by potentially dangerous or high-stress situations. It results in symptoms like heavy breathing and increased heart rate, and can jolt us into a state of heightened alertness. It's a vital self-defense mechanism associated with the classic fight or flight response, and enables faster reaction time in critical moments. In most cases, and for fans of horror, it's a positive effect on the system, almost euphoric. But there are negative associations too.
I don't believe it. I just don't believe it.
Apparently, it can cause stress-induced DNA damage, whatever the hell that is, premature aging, and psychiatric conditions like depression and anxiety.
I feel so depressed.
Frequent surges can lead to high blood pressure and other health issues.
God damn it.
For some people, their love or disdain of horror flicks isn't just a matter of taste, but rather a deep-seated psychological reaction. This is the first factor to consider when attempting to understand why some folks love the horror genre and some folks despise it. It is quite literally out of their control. Their body and mind either welcome the experience or reject it as a form of subconscious self-defense. Highly empathetic people tend to enjoy horror movies less because they absorb emotions more than normal. And I mean, what does that say about people who actually enjoy horror movies? I mean, it tells us that they're all psychopaths. Okay, no, we're not talking about the 21st century term that losers use. This isn't a designated safe zone free from bias, conflict, criticism, or quote-unquote threatening ideas. Jesus, stop asking the world to coddle you, you absolute child. No, we aren't talking about that kind of safe space. This safe space is a zone of distance from the actions or events of a particular story. It is the place that every movie, TV show, or book provides to its audience by default. A mental arena in which one can enjoy vicarious experiences and emotions without being placed in physical jeopardy. Like, I have no real interest in being sent into space to fight a horde of xenomorphs. I'm not begging to be hunted relentlessly by an unstoppable juggernaut of machete mayhem. And I'm almost certain that if I came across a knife-wielding talking doll in the middle of the night, I would instantly shit myself and die of a violent heart attack. Some of you nutters might be up for all of that, but the vast majority of people are slightly more risk-averse and keen on self-preservation. Horror movies allow us to glimpse into these kinds of worlds without actually being put in those situations. I mean, the same could be said for pretty much every genre of film or television or fiction or what have you. These are all forms of escapism, convenient vehicles for living out the lives of others.
But in ways we never could have imagined.
Each medium and genre provides different experiences, but all serve more or less the same purpose. Sensation seeking, idea exploration, terror tourism. It's the same principle whether someone is watching a brutal massacre or a tear-jerking melodrama. At the turn of the 20th century, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, published a book titled The Interpretation of Dreams. In this book, Freud introduced a whole bunch of gobbledygook about dream interpretation and Oedipal complex blah 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 blah. His ideas have been debated for well over 100 years, and we sure as shit aren't going to try to defend or debunk any of that stuff here.
You won't make any progress until you recognize your dreams for what they are.
And what are they?
The byproducts of guilt. Psychological scars stemming from moral conflicts and overt sexuality.
But I think it's worth pointing out that, within the scope of his theory on dreams, Freud developed the idea of wish fulfillment, or the unconscious desires of an individual that have been repressed by the ego and superego. His belief was that dreams were an unconscious mechanism in aid of resolving repressed internal conflict. For instance, let's say I get into a heated argument with a coworker and they zing me into a deep pit of embarrassment.
Help yourself to some shrimp. I brought it up for everybody.
The ocean called. They're running out of shrimp.
No matter what I say, they just keep pummeling my fragile emotions until a little part of my brain snaps.
Well, the jerk store called. They're running out of you.
You're their all-time bestseller.
I want to reach out and wring their neck, but I can't do it. What with societal norms suppressing my animalistic urge to rip that smug prick's limbs clean off. Instead, I excuse myself with tears running down my face and return home, where I proceed to drink myself into a self-hating stupor and pass out for the next 15 hours. During my slumber, Freud would argue that my dreams help me process the previous day's conflict and cope with the trauma.
Well, I had sex with your wife.
Just like our dreams, mediums like books and movies and video games can have a similar impact on repressed emotions or desires. I can experience the savagery of war through a first-person shooter or a compelling historical drama. I can confront the awkward and the ridiculous with a side-splitting comedy. And I can experiment with fear and interrogate difficult ideas with a pulse-pounding horror film. Whether willing or unwilling, aware or oblivious, books and movies and games allow us to deal with our thoughts and feelings on a deeply satisfying level. And horror just happens to dive into the more primal or controversial of those thoughts and feelings. Which brings us to the magic mirror, the reflection of the self. Horror movies allow us to experience fear and shock in a controlled environment. There is a heightened sense of catharsis when a threat is resolved, or a deep and unsettling question when it isn't. Horror movies often explore darker themes than other genres, with topics and situations that are typically avoided or impossible to encounter in everyday life. These vicarious experiences help viewers understand themselves on a deeper level, both consciously and unconsciously. And the unpredictability of horror movies can break through mental defenses like nothing else. The typical pattern recognition of other genres is subverted, allowing viewers to confront and process their fears in an arguably therapeutic way.
Ruby!
It digs into the taboo nature of our fears, death, madness, trauma. We are thrown into the abyss, but always manage to crawl back out to safety. There's nothing really quite like it. It's not for everyone though. Hell, there are some subgenres of horror that I completely nope out on, like a Jane Austen adaptation. Not interested, thank you very much. Self-mutilation, plotless torture porn, silent German Gothic expressionism?
Well, it does sound like a good idea, but no.
What am I, in film school? Am I in my early 20s trying to impress my pretentious friends? Get the f*** out of here. Give me a break. Before we get too deep into the history of horror, I think it's important that we define our terms. There are a lot of folks out there with a lot of different notions on what makes something fall into the category of horror. So let's start by looking at a definition. An intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Oh, but what's this? Cambridge Dictionary has a slightly different definition. Well, that's interesting. Nothing about disgust here, and we've upgraded from intense to extreme. Maybe Merriam-Webster can shed some light on the situation. Great. Thanks, Merriam-Webster, you absolute nutsack. We're back to intense, but now it's painful? And we're throwing dread, dismay, aversion, and repugnance in there too? Listen, I'm not above being sesquipedalian, but the grandiloquent tosspot who wrote this definition needs to be fired. Forthwith! Toot frigging sweet! Ah, screw it. Let's go slumming. Dictionary.com, what have you got for us? Again with the painful. And I'm sorry, but how have we not come to a consensus on what this word means? I'll bet I could get a better definition out of a random AI language model. Oh, come on. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. Intense emotional state of fear, shock, or disgust caused by something terrifying or revolting. Spot on. Designed to disturb, frighten, or scare via an eerie or menacing atmosphere. Was that so f***ing hard? 4 dictionaries couldn't pull it off, but an AI LLM does? Now that's horrifying. Okay, we're gonna dive into the history of horror, but I need to make something crystal clear. This is not an exhaustive history lesson. I'm not going into every single aspect of every single year or cinematic release or whatever. I'm trying to cover a century of movies in 10 to 15 minutes or something like that? So please don't get mad at me if I don't mention that obscure movie you think is super important to the conversation.
I wasn't gonna.
Please don't lose your mind if I gloss over some stuff for the sake of being concise and economical. You want a 2-hour deep dive on blaxploitation horror? I'm sure there's a video for that. You want me to stroke off Hammer Films for 90% of the video? Again, I'm almost positive that video exists. Okay?
Now shut the f*** up and let me do my job!
Widely considered the first horror movie, Le Manoir du Diable, or The House of the Devil, is a 3-minute silent film from 1896. While not intended to frighten its audience, the short film contains many Gothic elements that would act as a foundation for later features. It was directed by French filmmaker Georges Méliès, and predates his seminal work, Le Voyage dans la Lune, from 1902. Méliès made hundreds of films from the 1880s to the early 1900s, and many of them helped establish the roots of horror. 1897's L'Auberge ensorcelée, 1898's La Lune à un mètre, and La Caverne maudite, and 1899's Le Diable au Couvent, just to name a few. Long story short, this dude was the father of horror and responsible either directly or indirectly for every horror movie since. Respect! At the beginning of the 20th century, we start seeing early signs of horror in numerous adaptations of supernatural stories. In 1908, we get Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, an adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's 1886 novel. And in 1910, we get the first motion picture version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. What's important to note here is that while some movies of this time might be more notable or popular than others, it's the boom that's significant. Adaptations of supernatural stories were taking place across the world. From 1910 to 1920, there were multiple Frankensteins, multiple Jekyll and Hydes, multiple Pit and the Pendulums. It was a friggin' shit show. Everybody and their mother was adapting these stories. And then the Germans show up with their German expressionism. The Student of Prague, a 1913 adaptation of some poems and the Legend of Faust, helps set the stage for a decade of art films that continue the evolution of the horror genre. In 1920, we get Der Golem, The Golem, How He Came Into the World, a prequel to a 1915 film, The Golem, and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, widely regarded as one of the first true horror movies.
Or so the Germans would have us believe.
It's about a mad doctor who uses his sleeping assistant to commit crimes, more or less. I'm not doing the story justice, but as I mentioned previously, German expressionism isn't my jam. If you're a cinephile or interested in the art form, it's essential viewing. But from a story and entertainment standpoint, it's boring as shit. Same goes for 1922's Nosferatu. Super important to the history of horror, definitely worth checking out. I can absolutely appreciate it for what it is, a knockoff Dracula flick with some impressive cinematography. But all of these movies are an hour and a half tops, yet feel like they're 4 hours long. I'm sure that's a me thing, no doubt. Your mileage may vary. Oh, and what were the Americans doing during all of this? Well, they made an Ape Man movie in 1922 starring Lon Chaney called A Blind Bargain, and less than a decade later destroyed the original print like a bunch of jackasses. And there were a bunch of other movies that slowly crept their way towards horror. I mean, you might as well call the 1920s the decade of Lon Chaney. He starred in The Monster, The Phantom of the Opera, The Unknown, and London After Midnight. Guy was all over the place. Hollywood legend. But the 1930s is when things really kick into high gear. At the end of the 1920s, films began incorporating sound and dialogue in particular. The first feature talkie, or talking picture, was 1927's The Jazz Singer. It proved incredibly popular, and by the 30s, talking pictures were the standard for feature films.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
In 1931, Todd Browning and Universal Pictures gave us Dracula, featuring horror icon Bela Lugosi. Technically, 1913's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was the first film in their Universal Monsters series, but it was the success of Dracula that drove the franchise.
Dracula!
The popularity of the film resulted in the production of James Whale's Frankenstein later that year, which would in turn create a horror legend out of prolific actor Boris Karloff. The decade is marked by a series of incredibly strong entries in the horror genre, like White Zombie, The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, King Kong, The Mummy, The Black Cat, and many others. The popularity of horror movies continued to grow into the 1940s, with studios pushing sequels to established properties to cash in on name-brand characters.
I can imagine.
1939's Son of Frankenstein ushered in films like The Invisible Man Returns, The Mummy's Hand, The Ghost of Frankenstein, and Son of Dracula, along with a handful of new characters like the Wolfman and Paula the Ape Woman. The 1940s is also when we start seeing the first monster rally movies. Crossover features like Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. The latter spawning its own series of movies that saw the comedy duo meet the killer Boris Karloff, The Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and The Mummy. It was during this time, from the late 40s to the mid-1950s, that the horror movie craze fell off a cliff. Sure, studios were still putting out movies, but the broader appeal of the genre was beginning to wane. The public was getting tired and looking for something fresh. It may not be the best comparison, but horror movies of the 30s and 40s were like superhero movies of the 2010s and 2020s.
Oh, what you're saying is nonsense.
and in desperate need of a shakeup. And in 1955, that's exactly what the genre got. The Quatermass Experiment, known stateside as The Creeping Unknown, was an adaptation of the 1953 BBC television series of the same name. It's about a dude named Quatermass who invents a rocket and sends it into space. But the sole surviving crew member that returns to Earth is mutating into something that could destroy the planet and yada yada yada. The film was a huge success for its production company, Hammer Film Productions, and led to a sequel, and, of more importance to the topic at hand, the production of The Curse of Frankenstein. Whereas Quatermass was mostly a local success, The Curse of Frankenstein was a global hit, making a huge impression on North American and European audiences alike. The success of The Curse of Frankenstein led to a sequel, obviously, but also a contract with Universal that would see many of their characters given new life in Hammer films throughout the 50s and 60s. 1958 saw the release of Dracula and The Mummy the following year, The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll in 1960, The Phantom of the Opera in 1962. Hammer horror films dominated the market for nearly 2 decades, made international celebrities out of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, and amplified the gore and sexuality of its characters in a way that shocked and titillated audiences. Not only were they influenced by the horror movies of 1930s Hollywood, but also by the psychological thrillers of Alfred Hitchcock. 1960s Psycho, Hitchcock's horror masterpiece, would inspire Hammer films like Taste of Fear, Paranoiac, and Fanatic. Unfortunately, by the end of the 60s, Hammer Films was starting to run out of steam and found that they couldn't compete with a new wave of high production values and intense gore being presented by American and Italian films. By the early 70s, the company began to indulge in self-parody, alienating its audience and actors, with Christopher Lee distancing himself from future productions after 1973's The Satanic Rites of Dracula. The 1968 release of Roman Polanski's psychological thriller Rosemary's Baby, along with George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, signaled a cultural shift and teased a new direction for the industry. In much the same way that Hammer films upped the ante in terms of violence and sexuality, horror films of the 1970s amped everything up to 11 and dropped any pretense of modesty. Gore and eroticism shot through the roof. Films like A Bay of Blood, The Last House on the Left, The Exorcist, and Romero's sequel to Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, pushed the boundaries of the genre to previously unseen extremes. The 70s also saw a huge increase in independent films and exploitation flicks. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a 1974 horror film by Tobe Hooper, helped introduce a low-budget, ultra-real aesthetic that continues to influence directors to this day. And together with Hitchcock's Psycho, Mario Bava's A Bay of Blood from 1971, and John Carpenter's 1978 masterpiece Halloween, would form the foundation of the modern slasher film. Credit is also due to Italian giallo films, which are basically erotic horror thrillers with slasher elements. Directors like Mario Bava, Lucio Fulci, and Dario Argento started making these movies in the 60s and 70s, and their impact on the North American slasher scene of the 80s is undeniable. The 70s also saw a more pessimistic turn in storytelling. While the golden age of horror was likely to feature fairly traditional storytelling tropes or structures, the films of the 70s began to deviate substantially. No longer was the good guy or girl guaranteed to win, or if they did win, it might be seen as a more temporary development. Safe for now, for the moment. And just as the music industry had seen a revolution during the late 60s and into the 70s, a shift from uptight professionalism to loose experimentation, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, so too did the film industry. Writers and directors began to question the taboo. Topics that were once forbidden were now fair game. And refreshingly, the movie monsters began to branch out. It was no longer a series of Dracula and Frankenstein vehicles. There were reinterpretations, to be sure, it's not like those characters just disappeared. But the 70s and 80s saw a massive influx of fresh cinematic threats. A new breed of zombies, killer sharks, cannibals, legitimately frightening aliens. Psycho dolls, psycho mutants, cult leaders, and that's not even counting the movie villains that have become household names. Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface, Pinhead, Brundlefly, The Thing. Oh, and if you love campy stuff, the 80s also gave us trauma films like The Toxic Avenger, Class of Nukem High, and Redneck Zombies. But just like every period previous, the 80s saw a waning interest in horror. Excessive dependence on slasher movies and unoriginal sequels would once again see audiences paying less attention to the genre. The overwhelming popularity of horror throughout the early 80s once again faded and left us with the absolute travesty that was the early 90s. I can't stress this enough. The 1990s were shit for horror.
Huh?
You know, for the most part. There are always exceptions.
Groovy.
By the mid-90s, it was clear that the industry needed a jumpstart. The battery powering the genre was, for all intents and purposes, dead. And that's when an industry veteran and two industry newcomers injected some much-needed electricity with the 1996 self-aware slasher Scream and the 1999 found-footage darling, The Blair Witch Project. Side note, I only like one of these movies. Can you guess which one? Let me give you a hint. It's not The Blair Witch Project. Terrible movie. Not scary, not even a little bit. But here's the thing. Both of these movies are incredibly important when it comes to modern horror. Yes, both movies are responsible for a long line of god-awful copycats. And if they hadn't been created, maybe we would have been spared from the I Know What You Did Last Summer flicks and every terrible found footage movie.
Touchdown! Touchdown! Touchdown!
Maybe. That being said, Scream, at least the first in the series, is a well-made, intelligently deconstructed slasher from master of horror Wes Craven. It's responsible, to some extent, for a wave of self-aware horror gems like 2000's Ginger Snaps, 2004's Shaun of the Dead, 2009's Zombieland, 2012's Cabin in the Woods, and 2015's The Final Girls, among others. And maybe you hate found footage movies, maybe you love them. I'm not a huge fan of the style, but I'll readily admit that it can be used as an effective storytelling technique. I mean, it can also be used to excuse shit filmmaking, but you take the good with the bad, I suppose. Point being is that the movie, regardless of how you feel about it, was a cultural milestone for horror. Outside of Scream and Blair Witch, the 20th century ended with a disappointing whimper. Thankfully, the first quarter of the 21st century has been defined primarily by a slow and steady return to 70s experimentation and boundary pushing from a community of global filmmakers. 2002's 28 Days Later, 2004's Saw, 2008's Let the Right One In and Martyrs, 2014's It Follows, 2016's Train to Busan, 2020's reinvention of The Invisible Man, and 2023's Talk to Me. If anything, the first 25 years of the century will probably be defined at best by its creative disparity, or at worst by an underlying and pervasive theme of
Emotional damage!
But only time will tell. Okay, so for anyone who is new to the wonderful world of horror, or for anyone trying to expand their knowledge of the genre, I've compiled a list of must-watch movies. This list isn't particularly revolutionary or groundbreaking, it's fairly straightforward, but I wanted to put a somewhat chronological watch list together that would roughly cover the first 100 years of horror. These aren't necessarily the best movies the genre has to offer, but I feel they give a decent picture of the evolving industry. These are movies that I think anyone interested in understanding the history of horror need to see at least once.
That's a fact.
That is a fact.
Make sense? Alright, here we go. It's like 3 minutes, man. You can watch it for free online. No excuses, just do it. Okay, listen, just pick one. If you're into silent movies, go ahead and watch both. If you're an artsy prick, I suggest Caligari because Nosferatu is just fan fiction Dracula. And if you're a fan of vampires, go ahead and watch Nosferatu because it's kooky Dracula and Caligari is boring as all hell. I don't think it matters which one you go with here. Personally, I'd go with Frankenstein because it's a bit more unhinged. But Bela Lugosi as Dracula is classic. If you like either of these, you can get some bonus points for watching The Invisible Man. Same deal as number 3. I'd flip it this time around and go with Dracula over Frankenstein.
How dare you?
But both are solid films. And if you like either of these, I'd highly recommend checking out The Devil Rides Out. All 3 movies are directed by Terence Fisher, with the latter considered one of his best films. It's Hitchcock, and if you haven't seen it already, I don't even know what to say to you.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I prefer Dawn to Night, and both are historically significant films.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
But I think seeing Night of the Living Dead at least once should be mandatory for any fan of the genre. Now listen, I think it's important to recognize that the Italians were like a decade ahead of North America with their horror flicks. If you aren't familiar with at least one Bava, Fulci, and Argento film, I don't see how you can say you appreciate horror movies. Yeah, and how am I not going to recommend Halloween? Come on. Don't argue with me. It's Wes Craven. It's an important movie.
This isn't a movie.
It's all a movie. It's all one great big movie.
Does he have better movies? Sure, but we're going for historical significance, and this one is a bit more palatable than The Last House on the Left, and you know what? Fine, whatever. Oh my god, just go watch a Wes Craven movie and stop bothering me about it. No, I know, listen, I get it. Just watch the first and last 10 minutes and call it a day. Genres are weird. They can be as simple or as complex as you want them to be. If you don't care about them all that much, it's easy to pick a movie and categorize it with straightforward simplicity. The Matrix? Oh, that's an action movie. The Goonies? That's an adventure movie. No Country for Old Men? Yeah, that's a thriller. But anyone with half a brain knows this is BS. The Matrix is action sci-fi. The Goonies is comedy adventure. And No Country for Old Men is a neo-Western crime thriller.
What the f are you talking about, man?
Trying to pin down the genre of a movie is like trying to define a person by their profession. Oh, that's Dave. He's a doctor. But Dave is more than just a doctor. He also likes fly fishing and cake decorating and making racist jokes with his friends. Dave works at the local soup kitchen every weekend, but also gets a kick out of stealing shopping carts from homeless people. God, honestly, Dave is kind of a dick. Where was I going with this? Oh, right. Most films fall into more than one genre. They might fit predominantly into one category, but 9 times out of 10 they will have elements from other genres. Horror movies are no different. By the way, in case any of you are new to the concept of genre, it's basically just a category. The problem with genre is that it can get a little overwhelming with all of the subgenres, the subcategories that we've created over the years. That's not just a horror movie, that's a postmodern psychological Lovecraftian neo-noir western slasher. That's a body horror disaster true crime folk thriller musical. Stop it. Enough already. We need to get back to basics, so let's simplify this nonsense. We're not going to get rid of all of the subgenres of horror.
Don't be ridiculous.
Instead, we're going to round them all up, corral them into 6 core categories, and then get on with our lives. These 6 core categories gather films with similar styles, themes, and/or settings into easily defined groups. Think of it like a tree, the tree of horror. I'm sure I'm stealing this concept from someone, but I'm old and my ability to remember things is not so good. If I've cribbed this idea, apologies, but it's a rock-solid way of explaining this stuff, so sorry, not sorry. Picture a tree. The trunk of this majestic wood boner is the top-level genre of horror. The large branches are the core categories, and each of the core categories has subgenre twigs sprouting off in every which way. And to the nerd at the back of the room shouting,
"What do the roots symbolize?"
Dude, f*** off. We're done with the tree analogy. To be clear, the 6 core categories are subgenres of horror proper, and not amalgamations like action horror, which is just horror with explosions, or western horror, cowboy hat horror, or sci-fi horror, like cyborg stuff or space violence. Those are combinations of top-level genres that are generally thrown into subgenre categorization. Categorization. Similarly, found footage or screen life movies don't get their own subgenre because those are film and storytelling techniques. Oh, I can hear so many of you getting absolutely irate. I don't care. My video, my opinion. Take a few deep breaths and follow me through your dark forest of hatred. Here are the 6 core categories of horror. Horror of the grotesque deals with, at its most basic level, gore for the sake of gore to more avant-garde interpretations of gore as an exploration of deeper themes.
What, are you kidding?
No, serious.
This category includes genres like body horror, torture porn, slashers, and splatterfests. Generally speaking, if you're watching a movie that seems intent on grossing you out or making you uncomfortable through the use of visual representations of violence and gore, it belongs here. Why are grotesque movies important? Well, they tap into our primal fears and induce visceral reactions. Gore and extreme violence can induce a sense of unease with the audience. It can be used to represent or highlight themes, and it can be used as an artistic mechanism for drawing the audience in or pushing them away. Horror of the psyche, or psychological horror, focuses on the mental and emotional states of its characters. If you're watching a movie that deals with madness, paranoia, or existential dread, odds are that you're watching psychological horror. Common themes in these kinds of movies are isolation, trauma, the perception of reality, and so on. They're concerned with an exploration of the darker aspects of the human psyche.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
This is usually where we would find subgenres like art house, elevated, and Lovecraftian horror. Psychological horror is important because it has the capacity to elicit anxiety or provoke introspection. It can create strong connections between a character and the audience and address universal themes and fears.
Everything I've said is true, it's real.
Horror of the apocalyptic is concerned with existential threats. Apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic stories dealing with a civilizational collapse or imminent situational doom. This category would include typical apocalyptic horror movies along with technological horror, survival horror, and other related subgenre fare like zombie flicks and alien invasions. Why are apocalyptic movies important? Because they allow viewers to explore and confront the potential horrors of the unknown. They enable conversations about what it means to be human, and help us understand personal fears via larger-than-life threats. Horror of the natural is all about real-world terror. These films tend to focus on realistic but terrifying scenarios featuring animals, natural disasters, or serial killers. The idea here is to scare without resorting to supernatural elements, to horrify viewers with the darkness of reality. This is where we would find subgenres like creature horror, eco-horror, and true crime. Disaster porn is technically a subgenre of action movies, but many would fit the description for horror in general, so we can add that in here too. And no, Sharknado doesn't count. Natural horror movies are important because they serve as a reminder of the volatility and danger of the real world. They allow us to experience plausible, life-threatening scenarios from a safe distance. They are cautionary tales about the nature of man and the fragility of existence. Horror of the supernatural is, you guessed it, terrifying stories of a supernatural nature. Of all 6 categories, this is probably the broadest and least specific. Supernatural horror is home to dark fantasy, paranormal horror, possession flicks, monster movies, folk and gothic horror, witches, vampires, werewolves, all that jazz. Why are supernatural horror movies important? Well, they teach us about our primal fears and remind us of our base survival instincts. They challenge our understanding of reality and help us question subjects like death and morality. Supernatural horror helps us explore the unknown and unexplainable. And lastly, horror of the absurd draws from comedic situations.
Something funny's happening around here.
These are your horror comedies and parodies, movies that blend classic tropes or setups from the darkest genre with humor or absurdity from the lighter side of cinema. When done correctly, these movies move from the fringe to the focus, oftentimes being regarded as the best examples of horror. And horror comedies are important because they blend 2 opposing emotions. They allow viewers to experience all of the aforementioned benefits of horror movies without being overwhelmed by them. A skillful balance of horror and humor can enhance the viewing experience and remind viewers that even in darkness, there is light. Now, with that being said, let's brighten things up a bit and take a look at some of the best horror comedies out there. These are movies that will leave you with a deeper appreciation for the horror genre, along with a serious case of the giggles.
Could you just cut to the chase? I'm kind of in a rush.
Alright, so what happens when you take the guys responsible for the Naked Gun and Hot Shots movies and get them to lampoon the horror movies of the early 21st century? Well, you get the funniest entry in the scary movie franchise.
Everyone you love around you's dying!
If you appreciate politically incorrect raunchy slapstick and you're old enough to remember movies from 20 years ago, this flick will be right up your hoo-ha.
I wish I had your shaved pussy.
Nobody's getting Snowball.
Unfortunately, that also means that Scary Movie 3's references are a bit dated, and your enjoyment will probably depend on the decade in which you were born. It's also not really a horror movie and has some inexplicable shoutouts to 8 Mile and The Matrix. I don't know what the hell's going on here. I'm completely indifferent to Jesse Eisenberg. I don't know what it is about the guy. I don't love him, I don't hate him, but Woody Harrelson, on the other hand, has been a favorite since I fell in love with Cheers back in the 80s.
I like it. I don't like it. I hate it. I like it. Shut up, Woody. I like it. I like Somebody make him stop. I like it. I like it.
The combination of these two actors in 2009 Zombieland, for some reason, works incredibly well. Thanks in no small part to the excellent writing and slick direction. Zombieland is a movie that knows what it's meant to be. It doesn't shortchange the horror in favor of the comedy, and vice versa.
I think you might pull through.
No.
It gives comedy and zombie fans exactly what they want in an entertaining and heartwarming 83-minute feature.
So fun. Just good entertainment for the whole family.
Yeah.
As someone who still refers to Molly as ecstasy and doesn't understand why Kool-Aid is a quote-unquote black person drink, because goddamn it, Kool-Aid is delicious. Oh yeah! I really enjoyed The Blackening. Does it wear its politics on its sleeve?
All lives matter.
Yeah. Is it overtly racist? Yeah.
Wrong. That's wrong. But it's okay.
Kind of. But that's also the point. I mean, it's called The Blackening for a reason. It's ultimately a commentary on what it means to be black. It satirizes horror tropes and racial stereotypes in some thoughtful and, more importantly, humorous ways.
We have to split up.
It does precisely what a horror comedy should do. My only complaint is that it's incredibly predictable and lacking in creative kills.
You're asking for too much.
Am I?
It's an 80s punk rock, brain-eating zombie fest.
It's just too hideous, isn't it?
Dan O'Bannon's The Return of the Living Dead continues the undead tradition of societal satire with a fun and original take on the zombie mythos.
I like it. It's a statement.
It's gross and campy in all the right ways. And it boasts some great performances by James Karen and Don Calfa. Unlike Zombieland, which balances the horror and comedy in favor of a more palatable experience for the average viewer,
Why?
Return of the Living Dead is first and foremost a balls-to-the-wall zombie flick.
Send more paramedics.
That also happens to be funny as hell. If you enjoy vampires but think the seriousness of Anne Rice-style bloodsuckers is super cringe,
Shame. 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 Bad vampire.
and if you aren't completely sick of mockumentary-style movies,
You want to draw attention to this house,
You've got a whole documentary crew following you around.
What We Do in the Shadows is definitely worth checking out. It's a lighthearted ode to movies like Nosferatu and Dracula, with some New Zealand charm and low-key hilarity from start to finish.
A friend has just been killed in a fatal sunlight accident.
It was written and directed by Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords and Taika Waititi before he became an insufferable dick.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
While it may not hold a candle to the over-the-top gore of Evil Dead 1 and 2, Army of Darkness is still an incredibly fun sequel in its own right.
This is my boomstick!
It cranks up the humor and fantasy adventure elements while evolving Bruce Campbell's iconic Ash Williams character in a medieval setting. It's an absolute blast to watch and has some of the best and most quotable lines out there.
Shop smart. Shop S-smart.
Give me some sugar, baby. Groovy.
You found me beautiful once.
Honey, you got real ugly.
I'll swallow your soul!
Come get some.
Hail to the king, baby.
It would be higher on the list if the gore from the series hadn't been ruthlessly castrated. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is a fantastic parody of slasher films.
You guys, going camping?
Tyler Labine and Alan Tudyk absolutely kill it in this movie. Pun intended. It's a smart and well-crafted inversion of the classic slasher, a touching buddy comedy, and a clever satire of horror tropes.
Do we look like a couple of psycho killers to you?
The writing is top-notch, the acting is on point, and Eli Craig's direction complements both to produce one of the best horror comedies of the 21st century.
Who are you guys?
We're the Ghostbusters.
The quintessential 80s horror comedy, Ghostbusters is, arguably, Ivan Reitman at his very best, and working with a perfect ensemble cast.
Is this true?
Murray, Aykroyd, Ramis, and Hudson complement each other effortlessly, and the supporting cast is flawless. It also features one of the most popular movie songs ever, one of the most recognizable movie ghosts, one of the greatest movie monsters in cinematic history, and the Ecto-fucking-one. Maybe it's the British humor, maybe it's the brilliantly constructed plot.
Can't see any. Maybe it's not as bad as all that. Oh, no, there they are.
Maybe it's the fact that Shaun of the Dead is simultaneously a pitch-perfect ode to classic zombie flicks and a beautifully written original story in its own right.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Hell, what am I talking about? It's all of these things and so much more. It's a comedy, it's a parody, it's a movie about friendship and love and responsibility.
He's not my boyfriend. Might be a bit warm, the cooler's off. Thanks, babe.
All wrapped up in a meticulously crafted package that invites repeat viewings. Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg knocked this one out of the zombie-infested park. The only duo to do it better was Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder.
That goes without saying.
After 50 years, Young Frankenstein remains the pinnacle of horror lampoons.
That's Frankenstein.
Like Shaun of the Dead, Young Frankenstein is a spot-on send-up of one of the greatest movie monsters. The comedic timing and tone captured in this classic is unparalleled.
I've got to look normal. We've all of us got to behave normally.
The jokes are still as funny as ever, the cast is fantastic, and the movie manages not only to pay homage to the 1931 original, but stand on its own.
Give my creation!
It's a perfect horror comedy and a must-see for any fan of either genre.
Well, this was fun.
Film censorship is a real On the one hand, as a father and as someone who appreciates the ever-diminishing trait of common sense, I completely understand its necessity. I think there are some films, some types of content, that are just too extreme for kids. And while age ratings can, have, and will be abused by overprotective bureaucrats and politicians, I think they are helpful and, generally speaking, serve a noble purpose.
I do it to protect people.
On the other hand, as an artist and creator, I kinda think censorship is hot garbage that stifles creativity and free expression. Maybe both points are valid. Maybe that's just the price we pay for living in a society. Oh my god, we live in a society! Let's rewind a bit. What is censorship? Well, when it comes to motion pictures, it is three practices that manifest in slightly different ways depending on the country in question. The removal of frames or scenes from a particular film prior to release, the restriction of content based on age, or the outright banning of a film. These practices are usually the result of objections to the content of a film, be they political or moral in nature. From a macro level, most restrictions focus on sacrilegious content, extreme violence, or other controversial materials. Censorship has been around in one form or another for as long as the written word has existed. I'm guessing. Listen, we're talking about film censorship here. I'm not doing a video essay about censorship in general. And I'm not a historian.
Oh yeah. That's right.
All you need to know is that not long after the arrival of films, governments around the world were trying to exert authority over the industry.
But what if it gets into the hands of children?
Exactly.
Kids could be rewinding and watching those scenes over and over.
Britain jump-started the censorship of films back in 1912. Well, hold on. Germany actually introduced legislation to censor films way back in 1906, but then abolished film censorship in 1918, only to reintroduce it with the Motion Picture Law of 1920. And the United States followed suit with the Hays Code of 1922, which later became the Motion Picture Production Code of 1930. It's for your safety. Shut up and stop questioning authority. The Hays Code wasn't really taken seriously by anyone in Hollywood until the Catholic Church stepped in around 1934. They threatened to boycott indecent movies.
No. No, no, no.
And the prospect of legitimate financial losses made studios pay attention. Movies without a Hays Code seal of approval could face a $25,000 fine. And a very real anti-horror intention was introduced with some incredibly ambiguous guidelines. Lowered moral standards were forbidden. Films that had the audience sympathize with criminals, sinners, or evildoers was off limits. There was a push for quote-unquote correct standards of life, whatever the hell that means. And laws, both human and natural, were to be respected.
You will respect my authority!
It gets crazier. The Hays Code expressly prohibited profanity, nudity, drug trafficking, white slavery, interracial relationships, ridicule of the clergy, STDs, sex perversion, and the willful offense to any nation, race, or creed. In other words, they got rid of all the fun stuff. The folks behind the Hays Code were also not super into big screen representations of non-hetero, non-Christian, non-white, or unmarried individuals. Shocking, I know. In 1968, the United States replaced the Hays Code with the MPAA film rating system, 5 classifications aimed at helping audiences understand what they were getting into before watching a movie. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these. G for general audiences, PG for suggested parental guidance, PG-13 for parents strongly cautioned, R for restricted, not for kids under 17 unless they have an irresponsible parent or an older brother with a bit of facial hair, and NC-17, which restricts access to, wait for it, only those who are 17 and older. There were actually only 4 classifications when the rating system was first introduced. You can thank Gremlins and Temple of Doom for PG-13, which didn't exist prior to 1984. Well, that's an appropriate year. Anyway, most countries have something similar in place, though the age ranges and naming conventions may differ. At a fundamental level, I think these systems are well-meaning, but I don't know a single person, nor have I ever visited a single theater that has taken this kind of system seriously. Well, scratch that. You know who took this stuff seriously? The UK, otherwise known as the Germany of the 1980s and 2020s.
No, don't laugh, sir. That is the truth.
More specifically, it was Mary Whitehouse and the NVALA, the National Viewers and Listeners Association.
Your children and your families are very much at risk, particularly at this time, from video nasties, from media violence, from and even could be from cable television.
Due to a loophole in the UK's film classification laws, a black market of uncensored films was established in the early 80s. This drove Mary absolutely mental.
Theft, lying, swearing, verbal aggression, etc., etc., etc.
She initiated a campaign that would eventually lead to video store raids, the infamous DPP list, and the Video Recordings Act of 1984. Again, the irony of that year.
Mrs. Whitehouse kept some of her harshest criticism for the new BBC series EastEnders.
The DPP list of questionable videos, or video nasties as they were called, was made public in June of 1983. 72 films appeared on the list, 39 of which were successfully prosecuted under the Obscene Publications Act.
Totally unsuitable for family viewing time.
Dealers or distributors of these films could be fined or jailed, and many titles were confiscated from retailers by local police. There was an additional list of 82 movies known as Section 3 video nasties that could not be prosecuted but were still fair game for confiscation. You're probably thinking, holy shit, these movies must have been horrendous abominations. They must be beyond vile if the government was forced to step in and take action. Well, let me give you a small sample of the horror movies that found their way onto these lists. The Last House on the Left, The Evil Dead, Possession, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th, The Hills Have Eyes, Phantasm, Prom Night, Scanners, Suspiria, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Thing. Crazy Brits. I mean, I guess it is all about context, right? These movies seem pretty tame to us now, but at the time, some of them were unquestionably shocking. But don't panic, as most of the films from the DPP list have since been approved by the BBFC.
Children at risk again.
And make no mistake, the UK isn't the only place where this nonsense happens. Movies get banned all over the world all of the time.
It's always the same, and it's always different.
and censorship isn't going away anytime soon. If anything, you could probably make a pretty strong case that it's on the rise again, specifically in Western nations.
Don't tell me of it. I don't want to hear.
I would be remiss if I didn't take this moment to say, digital ID. If you want to prevent your life from becoming a real-world horror show, you might consider saying the same.
We better get away from these parts. It isn't safe.
But let's not go too far down that rabbit hole. Back to the topic at hand. I'm not going to offer up a list of banned movies you should watch. Well, actually, you know what? That's not true.
Oh, you really must be joking.
No, I'm definitely going to do that. Here it is. There are more, obviously, because most bans are antiquated nonsense, but these are just the ones I could think of off the top of my head. Instead of going in depth with these movies here, I'm just going to encourage you to watch them at your leisure. And instead, we'll spend the rest of our time looking at 5 banned movies that I encourage you not to watch. Ranked from, maybe take a pass, to, dear God, do not watch this movie under any circumstance. Okay, we'll start with the least offensive of the lot and a representative selection.
Just watch.
I think Cannibal Holocaust has some merit. It's a commentary on the barbarism of quote-unquote civilized society and the ethics, or lack thereof, of modern journalism. I'm all for that, and it earns some cred for getting the director, screenwriter, and producers convicted of obscenity charges upon its Italian release. The movie was later banned in the UK as a publicity stunt. Go Video, the distributors of the controversial film, wrote anonymous complaints to Mary Whitehouse and the NVALA in an effort to drum up publicity for the VHS release, which didn't go quite the way they had intended. The movie was banned in the UK, Australia, South Africa, and a number of other countries, mainly because of the half-dozen animals killed on screen, but also the multiple instances of graphic assault of a not-so-sexy nature. Know what I mean?
Pretend you've seen nothing.
Really though, I think if the movie is going to be banned for anything, it should be because of its influence on found footage movies. That shit is unforgivable. But like I mentioned at the beginning of this, Cannibal Holocaust is a representative selection. I'm not trying to single it out here as something to be avoided. I think it's part of a larger group of movies that were banned for somewhat understandable reasons that became more popular and more important than they actually ought to be. It's just not a very good movie.
We have to let the public know the truth. We'll let the people be the judge.
The acting is subpar, the writing is nothing special, and the only reason anyone cares about it is because of the controversy. These same points can be applied to a lot of the video nasties. The point I'm trying to make here is that a controversial movie is not the same as a good movie, and a lot of the video nasties are just not worth your time. I might be wrong, but I get the feeling that every kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s heard about Faces of Death in the same way. It was a fringe movie, a rumor or dark secret shared among teenagers. It was that taboo video that featured real deaths caught on camera. It was the morbid precursor to Girls Gone Wild and bum fights, and it was something that seemed to only be possessed by your friend's cousin's friend's slimeball older brother. Faces of Death isn't even really a movie. It's more or less just 100 minutes of morbid stock footage juxtaposed against a woman giving birth right before the credits roll, and bookended by some weak bullshit narrative. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating. I am not. The amount of stock footage in this movie would make Ed Wood blush. Open heart surgery, dog fights, tribal rituals and animal slaughter, monkey skull bashing, seal clubbing, parachute malfunctions. You name it, this movie has some mediocre footage of it. This montage of milquetoast violence was banned in multiple countries, primarily in response to the numerous scenes of animal abuse. It's a rare case where I kind of agree with the censors. The film's artistic merit is specious, and the scenes in question aren't created with special effects. Now, I suppose you could make an argument for historical merit, but it contains legitimate animal cruelty, and personally, I think it's pretty egregious that anyone would be profiting off of that kind of material. And honestly, the only reason to watch this movie is to say that you've seen it, and that's not as much of a brag as some people would want it to be. Okay, what the hell is wrong with you people?
Now, let's see.
How the hell did Tom Six get away with making 3 of these things? I can kind of understand the first one as much as anyone can understand it, you know. It's a novel concept that's sure to gross people out.
I was really drawn to the film because of the medical aspect of it.
I suppose that's worth making a movie about. I mean, not really, but we'll give Tom and his crew the benefit of the doubt. I just can't wrap my head around 3. 3 of them! For those who aren't familiar with the series, it's about stitching people together ass to mouth.
If you were a surgeon, you could actually perform that surgery.
That's all you need to know. Actually, that's more than any of us need to know. Full Sequence, the second in the trilogy, was initially banned in the UK but has since been released after nearly 3 minutes of edits. The story revolves around a weird little man named Martin who is obsessed with the first Human Centipede movie. He decides to go on a crazy abduction spree and build his own human centipede in an empty warehouse. But here's the thing, I'm not advising you to avoid this movie because of all of the depraved nonsense. I'm not advising you to avoid it because of its third act fixation on the passing of excrement from point A to point Z. And yes, I'm Canadian and I say Z instead of Z because that's how the song works, damn it. No, listen, I'm advising you to avoid this movie because it's not particularly good and, spoilers, the events of the story are a daydream. It was all just a psychotic hallucination, and any movie that pulls that crap after the turn of the century deserves nothing but disdain.
I'm sure it's just a passing phase.
Fuck you, Tom Six. Oh, you're making a movie based on the Marquis de Sade's novel, The 120 Days of Sodom? And you're updating it to take place in late-stage World War II Italy? And infusing the adaptation with a heavy dose of Dante's Divine Comedy? That actually sounds like it could be pretty interesting, right? Except for the fact that it's nearly unwatchable. Listen, I love movies that criticize terrible governments. I love stories that speak truth to power and illustrate the horrors of war and fascism and excess power and all that stuff. But Sallow is a punishing watch. Extended scenes of nudity, abuse, torture, golden showers, and poop consumption make this art horror flick a chore to sit through. And that's before you factor in the questionable ages of several actors.
How old are these girls? Are any of them underage?
I don't know. So I have to assume they're all underage.
As developed as they may seem,
it doesn't mean they're 18.
The movie left me feeling sick and depraved, which I think is the point. I'm not trying to say that it's not effective in its aspirations. It certainly is. But this movie is not for the faint of heart. I'm not kidding here. A lot of people will use that phrase to describe fairly milquetoast horror movies, so it may not be an appropriate warning, but I really can't stress this enough. Unless you're a cinephile intent on watching every single horror movie regardless of how disturbing it might be, this movie is not for you. Sallow was banned in multiple countries for all the reasons you would expect. Oh, and the filmmaker was murdered 3 weeks before its release. Wild stuff. The less said about this movie, the better. What the f***? A Serbian film is, according to those involved in its production, a reaction to the state of modern Serbian media. Okay, if you say so. Unlike the 4 aforementioned movies, which I would ever so softly recommend avoiding if your constitution isn't very strong, this one should be a hard pass for 99.9% of the population. A Serbian film is soul-crushing and spirit-breaking. I can't even bring myself to recap it in any form. You can find a synopsis online if you're desperate to find out what happens. All I'm going to say is that it's about an aging adult film star, and the second half of the movie has left me permanently scarred. Run. Do not walk away from this movie. It is absolute nightmare fuel in the worst possible way. I wanted to include a few more movies in this list, but I'm not a huge fan of gonzo or extreme horror movies. I think it's great that they exist. I'm glad that there are artists out there expressing themselves in truly unique and disturbing ways, but a lot of this stuff just isn't for me. And spending countless hours editing footage of movies that have severely disturbed me isn't my idea of a good time. I'll close this all out by giving some honorable mentions to 1993's Shram, 2008's Martyrs, and 2024's Terrifier 3. If you're like me, you might consider taking a pass on those movies too. As for movie bans and censorship, it's important to note their historical significance. The history of censorship provides genuine insight on societal processes for dealing with discomfort through art. It says nothing about the quality of a film and everything about the scruples of its detractors.
Everything that I have done is to protect you.
I think censorship of any kind can be summed up best by the phrase, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." The concept of protecting the public from harm can be altruistic and noble, but more often than not leads to unintended negative consequences.
Well, no plan's perfect.
The Hays Code of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, along with the video nasties mania of the 80s, are perfect examples of this. The good fight isn't against censorship in toto, nor is it for censorship. The good fight is finding a common sense balance that protects free expression and those who need protecting in equal measure. I mean, we can dream, can't we? We've had over 100 years of horror movies. Thousands upon thousands of films from thousands upon thousands of unique voices, each with their own distinct take on the genre, each contributing to a rich history of cinematic violence. Pioneers like Méliès, Murnau, Browning, and Whale paved the way for visionaries like Hitchcock, Fisher, Corman, Romero, Carpenter, and Craven. And it's because of these storytellers and those like them that the genre has grown and evolved over the past century. They helped make horror movies something special, and a new generation continues the tradition. Which begs the question, where will horror movies take us in the future? In 2007, Netflix changed the media landscape. When I was growing up, we had 3 ways of watching movies. You could head out to the local theater and check out the latest releases. You could pop over to the neighborhood Blockbuster to rent something from Hollywood's back catalog. Or you could flip through a couple dozen television stations and try to find some random, pre-programmed entertainment. We had some technological developments, to be sure. Laserdiscs came around in the late 70s, but never really hit the mainstream like VHS tapes. If you're not familiar with Laserdiscs, they were like big-ass DVDs. Like DVDs the size of vinyl records. Oh, okay, I see what I've done there. Alright, so vinyl records are these large plastic discs that play... you know what? Never mind. You can figure it out on your own time. Anyway, DVDs took off and replaced VHS tapes in a matter of years. And while this media transition was taking place, a little thing called the internet started creeping up on everyone. It didn't happen overnight, but the early 2000s gave everyone their first glimpse at the possibilities of 21st century entertainment. And for a time, it was great. As internet access and speeds increased, so too did the potential for online distribution. And Netflix, a DVD rental service, saw a window of opportunity. They introduced movie and television streaming to the masses, destroying the movie rental business in the process. And for a time, it was great. But the other networks grew jealous of Netflix's success. They saw their companies going the way of Blockbuster, and they weren't content with living off of the table scraps of a streaming giant.
What do you want?
I want you to go out and kill. Kill!
They wanted their own streaming giant. All of them. The greed spread like a virus from one network to another, fueled by a pandemic and a growing hermit culture.
Get off my lawn.
Streaming services spawned like pod people. Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Apple TV, HBO Max, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Crunchyroll, Shudder. As streaming wormed its way into the dominant media delivery position, we witnessed the beginning of the end for physical media and theaters. Yes, both are still around, but they're on life support. Their extinction is inevitable.
You can see that, can't you?
A niche rebellion against streaming bloat, an uptick in piracy, and the occasional box office blockbuster, unfortunately, isn't going to save them.
You'll have to learn to live in a very strange new world.
Why does this matter? Well, because how you experience horror is just as important as the horror you experience. Watching a frightful feature with your friends at the local movie theater is a world apart from taking in a second screen scream fest. This isn't to say that it's impossible to enjoy movies because of how you watch them. Everyone enjoys movies in their own way. It's akin to listening to an album through the warm interference of a vinyl record versus the low bitrate hum of a digital music file. There's no right or wrong here, just different. But the changes in the media landscape also affect those who make movies. It affects the writers and the directors and the producers and the production companies. As of 2025, horror movies have become one of the last great moneymakers for Hollywood at the theatrical box office, which is kind of like a musician making a killing on tips for their performance on the Titanic. Man, I hope that hat full of coins can float, son. Horror movies do have an advantage on the sinking ship of cinema. Relatively small budgets can lead to substantial revenues.
I mean, look, there's almost no production costs. You can't take your eyes off it. It's incredibly realistic.
2022's Smile earned just shy of $220 million at the box office on a budget of just $17 million. 2025's Sinners, with a substantially higher budget of $150 million, surpassed its break-even point by nearly that same amount. This means that, at least in the short term, horror movies aren't going anywhere. If anything, they will continue to grow as a genre. At least until AI-generated videos take over. Studios are already using various AI technology to refine or complement existing audiovisual work. As AI improves, its implementation will increase until we get the inevitable 100% AI-generated movie. Hell, we already have an AI actress in Tilly Norwood.
Oh, for the love of baby Jesus!
And I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking it too. I have zero interest in watching an AI actor in an AI movie written by a soulless AI LLM. But let me ask you this. Who would you rather watch for an hour and a half? Tilly Norwood or Rachel Zegler?
I was thinking the same thing.
The question at that point will be, what can AI-generated videos bring to the horror genre? Oh, are you waiting for an answer? Honestly, I have no f***ing clue. But a program capable of visualizing anything someone can dream up has a lot of potential to create some truly horrific stuff. Horror films have always covered a wide range of topics and themes. More so than any other genre, horror acts as a mirror, a reflection of society's fears and concerns. And society's fears and concerns are not one-dimensional. Every generation, every decade, every cinematic epoch has multiple fears and concerns. So we can't simply state that one particular period of time is solely focused on one topic or one theme exclusively. That being said, in retrospect, we can definitely see patterns, overarching narrative similarities, commonalities. The monster mayhem of the 30s and 40s as symbolic representations of anxiety towards progress. The atomic age focus of the 50s and 60s, dealing with fears of civil strife and Cold War escalations. The supernatural films of the 70s, the slashers of the 80s, the self-awareness of the 90s. It was that last decade of the 20th century that truly changed the genre. The meta-awakening of the horror auteur was the birth of a new kind of nightmare. Horror was no longer on the fringe. It was a springboard for new interpretations of the genre. The early 2000s brought technological improvements in the form of convincing CGI and advanced prosthetics and practical effects. Filmmakers pushed boundaries and began to reinvent the genre, and a more interconnected global community led to a broader cinematic vocabulary. Notably, the Western interest in Japanese horror films would mold the styles and approaches of upcoming writers and directors, and a latent narcissism, a fixation with the self, would see horror movies shift towards the psychological. For the past decade and a half, there has been a noticeable shift to themes of grief, trauma, isolation, identity, and reality, which makes perfect sense when you consider some of the larger societal issues of the last decade or so. The adoption of social media that, ironically, isolates us from the world. A generation of kids who are hyper-aware of their emotions.
My emotions! My emotions!
The obvious gaslighting of mainstream media. The dividing nature of the pandemic and modern politics. It's no wonder that recent horror movies tackle the aforementioned themes so regularly. But how long will this fixation on the self last, and what comes next? Well, this is all pure speculation, naturally, but I think we're going to see a shift toward technological horror. Movies that deal with themes of uncontrollable or dehumanizing technological advancement, our place within a technocratic future, and the meaning of reality.
There is nothing real outside our perception of reality, is there?
As systems of governance shift and mutate, films dealing with themes of societal collapse will become more prominent. Oh, Jesus, this is getting kind of dark. You know what? Maybe we should just do another movie list. Yeah. Let's do that. Enough doom and gloom. We can't focus on what could be. We need to celebrate what is. So, here are 10 horror movies from the first half of the 2020s that prove modern movies aren't all streaming service slop. Alright, I'm going to be upfront with you. I have no idea where to start with this one. In a nutshell, it's about a serial killer who has sex with a car and gets pregnant and then goes into hiding it. You know what? No, I can't do it. I can't spoil this one. It's just too wild. It's body horror, it's Cronenberg-esque, it's a legit WTF kind of movie. But it's also a French film, so it goes in last place on the list. Did Together rip off the 2023 indie film Better Half? I don't know, maybe? I haven't seen Better Half. I couldn't find a copy of it anywhere. Some of the accusations seem quite damning.
What's that supposed to mean?
But at the end of the day, from a creative standpoint, it doesn't fucking matter. Creators copy each other or are influenced by each other all of the time. What matters is the final product. What matters is whether the movie is good or not. And fortunately for writer-director Michael Shanks, the movie turned out to be pretty darn good. It's a concept well executed with decent performances by Franco and Brie.
If we don't split now, it'll be much harder later.
There's gotta be another way.
My only gripe is that the atmosphere and horror established throughout the film is somewhat undercut by some laughable CGI during the climax and an unambiguous conclusion.
Welcome back, everyone.
It's a 70s retro found footage documentary style story about a late night talk show and demonic possession. And it stars David Dastmalchian as the host of the doomed show. If that doesn't sell you on at least one viewing, I don't know what will.
I really hope you love it. Gosh, I hope you love it. Please love it.
It's campy and fun and a genuinely creative take on the classic possession formula. Oh, shit. Another possession flick. Well, what can I say? I'm a sucker for an Aussie accent. Talk to Me isn't the most revolutionary of horror stories. It's not doing anything particularly innovative with the genre, but what it does do, it does incredibly well. It's a solid story elevated by exceptional performances from the entire cast. The scares are great, the special effects are top-notch, and the whole movie is a wild and compelling ride. I wasn't blown away by X. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was a perfectly serviceable throwback horror flick. But after watching Ty West's prequel, Pearl, well, I still feel the same way. It's still just okay. Pearl, on the other hand, is great.
I'm not staying on this farm!
It's the best of the X trilogy. It's something about the tone, the contrast of vibrant colors and cheery pretense against the disturbing atmospheric undertones and desperate actions of the protagonist. The movie works on its own, but also adds depth to its predecessor, and Mia Goth's performance is pitch perfect. I'd recommend checking out X, Pearl, and Maxine to get the most out of each movie in the trilogy, but if you have to pick just one, you can't go wrong with Pearl.
Next.
Hungry as dogs.
Woof woof.
It's a vampire musical. I mean, not really, but also, yeah, kinda.
We gonna kill every last one of you.
The movie is worth checking out for Miles Caton and Jack O'Connell alone. It's Ryan Coogler's best film to date and features some absolutely stunning cinematography.
I was just about to get good.
I liked Infinity Pool, Brandon Cronenberg's third attempt at camping out in his father's shadow.
What is that supposed to mean?
It had an interesting concept and some great performances by Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth, but it also felt like it was holding back, like Brandon wasn't willing to put the pedal to the metal. I spent most of my time with the movie hoping it would shoot off in a different direction or dive deeper into the psychological aspect of a doppelganger story. Ultimately, it was disappointing because Brandon's sophomore outing was so damn strong.
Very good.
Possessor is a tight and atmospheric gem, a horror espionage film that explores themes of invasive technology and identity. Oh, and it has Sean Bean doing what Sean Bean does best. Great performances, a sleek aesthetic, and a story that guides viewers through a series of increasingly grotesque scenarios culminating in pure third-act chaos. The Substance is a superb body horror flick that feels like a feminized evolution of David Cronenberg's legacy. It explores themes of aging and femininity without being condescending or preachy. And yes, it's all incredibly overt and obvious, but rather than having that detract from the story, it adds to it. Yes, another possession movie, but it's a genuinely shocking adventure featuring Argentinian Hugh Jackman. Nuff said, bub.
Are you watching?
I thought Barbarian was a competent but overrated film. It was an encouraging start to Zach Cregger's run as a horror auteur, but I wasn't as sold on it as some folks were. Excellent but obvious use of cliched subtext, decent acting, good atmosphere, but something about it wasn't clicking. Weapons, on the other hand, is a brilliant follow-up. Top-tier storytelling and performances, excellent structure, expert tension building, a cathartic resolution, absolutely beautifully constructed horror dealing with the themes of childhood trauma, the weaponization of children, and selfishness.
Yeah.
I struggled my way through the 2020s dumbfounded by the ease with which adults sacrificed the health and education of their children and grandchildren for their own comfort. I might be projecting some of my own emotional damage on the movie, but it feels like a story that is addressing this either directly or indirectly, and it's handled deftly. It's impossible to know where horror movies will take us in the future. As a mirror of our fears and anxieties, trying to divine the future of the genre would be like trying to predict the future. And yes, the encroaching AI media takeover will have a dramatic impact on every single facet of movie production. But I'd like to believe that there will always be a subsection of independent creators working to terrify us within the confines of the real world. I'd like to believe that there will always be a place for human actors and practical effects. Horror movies are so intrinsically tied to our humanity, to our sense of meaning, that it would be jarring to remove the human element. These movies help us understand ourselves and our fears, and I think something vital would be lost by letting a machine create them. I do know one thing for certain. If you want to see more horror movies, if you want to see what the next generation of writers and directors have in store for us, there's only one way to find out. Support them. When a new movie gets released, go see it in the theater. Rent it, stream it, support the creator in any way that you can. Let them know that their efforts are appreciated. Protest with your wallet when companies sideline creators and artists in favor of soulless AI technology. And at the very least, watch more horror movies. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would really appreciate a like, a sub, or a share. Recommend your favorite horror flick in the comments, or better yet, go recommend a horror movie to someone in real life. Grab some friends and watch some scary stuff together. Scream like a little girl. Piss your pants. Vomit uncontrollably. All that stuff. And remember, beware, take care.
It's okay, it's done now.